Aloha mai kako, and welcome to our show Keholani Cares, where we present issues that affect our everyday lives here on our island, Moko'oke'awe. We ask questions of community members, mainly countrymen and women of this Hawaii Pae Aina, and those directly connected with us. We do this in an effort to present a collective group of people, ourselves, your neighbors, whose voices other media sources will censor, distort, narrate over, or disregard altogether. It is important that our voices be heard, especially while under international distress, and that those originating from other homelands outside of this Hawaii Pae Aina afford the same respect to our countrymen and women that you would expect from foreigners visiting or residing in your respective nations of origin. After listening from this perspective, pule, decide on a moral and ethical course of action, then unify with those seeking remedy. Mahalo nui. Let us now begin our show.
The next guest has also been an incredible inspiration to me. Another person who has addressed that taproot in a way that, for me, was brilliant and unexpected and extremely fruitful for the world. Not just here, but I really applaud this woman who's going to, I'm sure, share some really incredible mana'o. Please put your hands together, Jennifer Ruggles.
Thank you everybody. It's such an honor to be here. It's an amazing panel. I'm really honored. I was a representative for the County Council of Puna, District 5, and I started to do research and educate myself on the legal and political status of Hawaii. And it became apparent to me that it appears that Hawaii is under an illegal military occupation. And so I mean, this is all very simply put. It's a lot more complex story than that. I received emails which had the UN Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner's signature on it, literally stating that there is an illegal military occupation of Hawaii as a result of a fraudulent annexation. He also goes on to state that the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom need to be being administered in Hawaii, not the laws of the United States. And that's where my concern came in as a lawmaker. And that's when I started to really take his memorandum seriously and start doing research to verify the claims that there was in fact a fraudulent annexation. I thought, why isn't more people talking about this if this is true? And when I researched it, there was no treaty. There was no treaty that ceded the Hawaiian Kingdom's territory to the United States. And that's the only way that the Hawaiian Kingdom could have become a part of the United States. The United States did it through a resolution, which is an internal body, it's an internal piece of legislation that has no effect beyond its borders. So what the United States is using to justify its presence here as being the state of Hawaii, the 50th state of the United States, is a piece of legislation that would be equivalent to me as a council person of having introduced a resolution saying that now Canada is a part of Hawaii County. We all know that that isn't legally possible, but that is the logic that this whole system is based on, and it's crazy. So it became a question to me if in my capacity as a legislator for the United States, if I could be incurring criminal liability for war crimes by administering United States law in the Hawaiian Kingdom, and if I could be violating my oath of office. My oath of office is something that we all have to take as public servants, and my oath of office specifies that, so it comes from Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, which states, treaties shall be the supreme law of the land. And that is also the supremacy clause. And then it goes on to state that all legislators shall be bound by oath to uphold and support this Constitution. My very oath comes from that very clause that says treaties are the supreme law of the land. How many of you know what the Hague and Geneva Conventions are? Okay, good. So not that many people. Okay, so the Hague and Geneva Conventions are treaties that the United States signed. And these treaties go into effect in any time during wartime. And so in 1893, President Grover Cleveland, United States President, stated that the United States Marines had committed an act of war against the Hawaiian Kingdom. This means that those treaties, according to international law, would not take effect. These treaties specify that during occupation, the laws of the occupied state need to be being administered, not the laws of the occupier, which is just what the UN Human Rights High Commissioner said. In Title 18, Section 2441 of United States Code, it's the definition of war crime is any violation of these treaties signed at Geneva. It specifies signed at Geneva by the United States. So these are treaties that the United States is a part of, that it appears, are in direct violation of in Hawaii. And so it appears war crimes continue to be committed with impunity since 1893. And so I decided that I would draft a letter to our county attorney, who's known as Corporation Counsel. And I hired an attorney to help me draft the letter because I wanted to make sure that all of my concerns were adequately considered. And I wanted to know if I was incurring criminal liability for one, legislating United States law in the Hawaiian Kingdom, which appears to be in violation of specific articles of the Hague Geneva Conventions, United States treaties. Secondly, for being complicit in the collection of taxes and foreclosures. And third is to be complicit in prosecutions, because those are all county funds funded. It was an 11-page letter with almost 400 pages of attachments with all of my evidence that I wanted him to address. Consider all these things and then assure me, and the legal definition of assure is to put certain beyond all doubt that I am not in violation of my oath of office and that Hawaii is not actually legally occupied. And then I will continue to legislate. But until you assure me, then I would refrain from legislating. So I gave that letter to him. And the next morning he responded with a letter. He said, in response to your inquiry, we opine that you will not incur any criminal liability. See Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. Federal law cannot conflict with international law. So I looked at Article 6. Article 6 is the Supremacy Clause. That's where my oath comes from. That's the very article that I was concerned about. And furthermore, it doesn't say that international law cannot conflict with federal law. It doesn't say that anywhere within the article. So I'm trying to make sense of this. I give it to my attorney. My attorney says that that's not true. International law cannot violate federal law. So well, I don't know if it's relevant, and it's not in the article. So I sent a letter back saying, the legal definition of assure is to put certain beyond all doubt. What you gave me was a conclusionary statement unsupported by any facts and analysis. I've received letters from you in the past. For example, I was trying to give a grant to a Porcupine Association for a community center, and he gave me 5 pages on why I couldn't, and it included case law and facts and analysis, and that was something that I was expecting back from you. Please assure me, consistent with the legal definition of assure, to put certain beyond all doubt, that Hawaii is not legally occupied, and he refused to give me another letter. So what's important here is that he could not dispute.
Default.
He did not dispute that Hawaii is actually being unlawfully occupied. And so from there, I had 3 months left in office. I feel I've done my due diligence in researching what I should be doing. And at that point, I had come to understand that the Hawaiian Kingdom is in fact being illegally occupied. And so according to the treaties, which I am bound by oath to follow, the Hague Geneva Convention specifies that as a civil servant, I have a special obligation because I am an agent of the United States. So that special obligation is to ensure respect, to go through the greatest pains to ensure respect for the convention in all circumstances and advocate for the rights of protected persons. And so I put every department here on notice regarding specific violations of the Hague Geneva Conventions and the rights of protected persons. for the remaining 3 months. I held frequent town halls, and I tried to keep people updated while I was in my office working on a lot of other things that had nothing to do with legislating. Legislating is really only 20% of our time as council members. The rest of it is dealing with certain, very small, distinct complaints having to do with parks and roads, and basically serving as a liaison between the departments and your constituents. So I continue to do that. And in the meanwhile, you guys all saw what the media was doing. They attacked my personal character. They distorted the issue. They tried to make it about my salary, how I'm not doing my job, how I'm associated with the Hawaiian Kingdom Sovereignty Group. Made it about my dad, somehow. Yeah. And
bullshit.
And what's amazed me was that they couldn't dispute, and that they didn't actually focus on the point that Corporation Counsel didn't assure me that we're not in illegal occupation right now. That's what they should be focusing on. He's not doing his job. He should give me that opinion. So that was my story as far as being the council person. Where's all this going? Now that we're talking about stories. So there's also a new documentary out. It's called Speaking Truth to Power, ironically. And it tells the whole story there, and all of my letters, my town halls, everything are on my website, jenruggles.com. And if you YouTube Speaking Truth to Power Hawaii, the documentary will come up. It's about an hour and 40 minutes. It's a pretty well put together documentary. So now I want to share something with you that's personal, and it's really from my heart, and it's inspired by this event. And it's as it relates to my identity as being a woman and being true to myself. And this is something that I truly believe in, and it might sound a bit radical, but I have to share it with you. I want to talk about the stories that we consume as a society. We have stories, and they help define us as who we are as people, our history, where we're going, and who we are now, our assumptions about how we relate to each other, and the world, and the natural world. These stories are so powerful. In Hawaii, there's kulipo, they're called lo'olelo. In America, it's called entertainment. So growing up as a poor white girl in Mountain View, I consumed this normal American media that everybody else did. And I did not have a very good level of confidence. I didn't like myself very much. And I listened to androcentric, just the normal American and androcentric culture. How many of you guys know what androcentric means? It's an interesting word, and I think we should all know it. Androcentric means white male. It's white male centered, centered around white men. So I listened to androcentric music, video games, TV, cartoons, and they glorified violence and anger, and movie after movie, Disney movies that talk about these magical stories, Cinderella and Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. So they started that this archetypical woman should be like this very tiny, very thin, tall, white girl that's always really sweet and kind, and she does what she's told, and that our value as women in the world is what we look like. That's what we have to offer, is our beauty and our grace, and that we listen to what we're told. And so these stories told me that my value in the world was my appearance. And all of these stories shows the same standard of beauty, the same character of the woman who the producer helplessly victimizes, and then she's saved by her prince in shining armor, who takes her away, and they live happily ever after, and she's his property. And they also told us that we should be terrified of old age, and that we should never get old, and we should never have wrinkles, lest we look old and haggard. Boys, on the other hand, they're told that they need to be strong and in control, and be able to strategically and intelligently, physically dominate and navigate almost every situation, and that their values and their intelligence and their capabilities and their personality and who they are. And if they get old and wrinkly, they're simply wise and sophisticated. They can still be heroes, and they can even still be sexy. So how does that wrap up our stories here? Did you know that only 7% of directors in America are women? And only 10% of all of the films written in America are written by women. That means 90% of all of the movies and the media that we consume come from a male perspective, and most likely a white male perspective. And in 2017, only 35% of films had a female protagonist. Protagonist is the main character. And these are all statistics from the Center for Study of Women in Television and Film at the San Diego State University. And if you notice, for the movies that have a female hero like Catwoman or Wonder Woman, they're highly objectified, highly sexualized. And then for the women, for the movies where they're not heroic, their lives revolve around some romantic, happily ever after situation with a man. So we're struggling in America as far as our stories go. And on top of that, more than 70% of women on screen, period, are in their 20s and 30s. So we're severely misrepresented and underrepresented in these stories. After I was elected, I was invited to speak to a troop of Girl Scouts. And after answering questions about ranging from what I wanted to be when I grew up to what my favorite color was, I had to, when they were all done with their questions, I just said I have to say a couple more words to them. And I said, do you guys know, like in movies and music videos, video games, magazines, do you know how women look? And those, you know it's actually physically, scientifically impossible to look that way?
By the way.
Yeah. In the movies, they spend hours airbrushing and caking on makeup and making sure that not one little bit of healthy fat shows, and making their hair look, just making their skin look like plastic Barbie doll. And in magazines, they do the same, except in magazines, they can actually manipulate the video, the pictures, to make them look thinner, and make their lips bigger and their eyes bigger, and just change how they look normally. And why do they do that? They do that because when we look at them, we feel a little bit ugly, and we feel a little bit overweight. And then we feel like maybe we need to buy some beauty products to help us make up for what we don't actually look like. And so that we buy lotions and creams and diet pills, and maybe even do the worst, plastic surgery. The average female American spends nearly $300,000 on beauty products in her lifetime. $300,000. And that we have so much more to offer this world than what we look like. Especially when our ecosystems are collapsing before our very eyes. I told them, don't buy into that competitive catty culture on TV. Don't judge each other for what we look like, for what you're wearing, and stick together. What we look like should be the least of our worries when it comes to what our purpose is in life. And our value in this world is much more than how visually pleasing we can be to some guy who isn't going to save us.
But he will eat everything in your refrigerator.
So that's what I told them. There's such deep-seated insecurities that we breed into our women as they grow up in this American media culture. And they cause us to feel unworthy, unempowered, and yielding to men. And then we wonder why women don't step up into positions of power and decision-making. American teenagers spend more than 10 hours every day consuming American media. And much of this media is objectifying women's bodies and distorting what we should actually look like.
Yeah.
The American Psychological Association is calling self-objectification a national epidemic right now. And girls who self-objectify are more likely to have depression, lower confidence, lower ambition, and lower GPAs. Not to mention, the dehumanizing somebody, this is a tactic that the military uses, to dehumanize somebody or turn them into an object or a thing is the first step to justifying violence against them. 1 in 4 women will be abused by their partner in their lifetime. 1 in 5 women will be the victim of rape or attempted rape in her lifetime. 78% of 17-year-old girls are unhappy with their bodies, along with the majority of women in our society. The majority of women feel unhappy with their bodies. I've been there, and I'm still there sometimes. It's so tragic that it takes work to appreciate what works perfectly fine. Our bodies work perfectly fine. And the fact that 80% of us don't actually appreciate them is tragic. And 65% of American teenagers have an eating disorder. And we wonder why more women don't step up into positions of power and decision making. In 2017, women made up 19% of Congress. So it's time that we start to define our own stories and stop subjecting ourselves to stories that tell us that we need to look a certain way or act a certain way. And we need stories that tell us our value is in more than our appearance, that our value is in our intelligence, and our wisdom, and our emotional, mental, spiritual strength and clarity, and our creativity and our ideas, and our ability to make stuff happen, just be honest, good human beings. So I have a confession. I haven't watched a movie in 10 years. So I invite you to join me. Let's be conscious about the stories that we subject ourselves to and that we allow into our psyches and we allow into our children's psyches. That tell us about what we can and cannot look like, do, and be in the world. It's time for us to write our own stories and allow the stories into our consciousness that only serve to enlighten and empower us. I think it's time for us to stop consuming American media. So this is something that I leave you from my heart, is I think we need to start boycotting American media. I think that that's one of the most empowering things that a woman could do, is just stop. Just don't look at that stuff. Just don't allow it into you. And it's time for us to define for ourselves who we are, what our story is, in honor of our kuleana here, of who we are, and all of the work that needs to be done in taking care of our community and taking care of our world. It's time for us to step up to the plate and start holding ourselves accountable and start to empowering ourselves and loving ourselves. Because there's too much at stake right now, and there's too much work to be done.
90% of all of the top rented films in that culture have either verbal or physical abuse towards women. So 90%. And then when RIMPAC and things come here, when there's all these boys that haven't figured out who they are, you can't put the porn sites, the visits to the porn sites, way outweigh Twitter and Facebook and this, that, the other. It's all porn goes up. And of course the sex trade, the slave trade goes up. No one ever talks about these things. And quite frankly, these stats, like 1 in 5 women will be raped in their lifetime. Sorry. And no one I knew in high school ever reported. I never did. Nobody ever reported that they had been raped. So when we think of how outrageous these stats are, we have got to be kidding ourselves, and we're going to stop it. And we're going to turn this thing, and we're doing it with kapu aloha. We're doing it with love. And as long as we're, being peaceful ourselves, we have a shot. But because it's certainly not getting a gun right now and going and, getting rid of the people that are killing us. I'm not going to do that. And so, thank you for, my goodness, what a dose. Could I have a round of applause? No, we're going to be more creative and birthing the next chapter of our story. Just for this occasion, in case my mind went. So after all that's said, after all that's done, after 1.4 billion minimum, after all the testimony proved that TNT was a crime, the gavel came down with another hard blow, just to put a little salt in a wound so raw. As the paper opponents hit the bar for another mighty time. Just imagine if we awoke, throw off the mafia's fake state yoke, and pulled our support from their endless war machine.